Oh, yes. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I'm going to talk about the Audeze LCD-X. This is the 2021 variant, which means they've actually made a couple little tweaks to the pads, the magnet structure, and overall the end result is a slightly lighter version of the old LCD-X and a little bit more presence in the mid-range. It's not as dark or veiled as the old one. So I'll get into all the sound quality stuff, but there are two versions effectively to take away. You have the Creators Edition and the Premium Edition, and the Creators package is $1,200. Comes with this case and a really nice 1/4-inch 6-foot long to mini XLR cable, and you can get it with leather or leatherette pads. They give you the option now. And then on the Premium Edition, you get more cables and you get a better travel case. This is actually a pretty robust case. It doesn't have the most heavy-duty locking mechanism, but it's a pretty nice add-in for $1,200. It's one of the best cases I've seen in this price range, period. Now, this was sent to me for review by Audeze, so I want to give a huge thanks to them, because without doing so, that wouldn't have been possible to cover this. I don't have any special kickbacks or anything worked out with them. In fact, the referral links I'll put in the description below. The generic affiliate links to help support the channel. It'll take you to Audeze Audio, which is a pretty reputable website. There are a lot of good headphone stores online and reputable places to buy at, so make sure you get it from a reputable place. You don't have to use my link, but doing so does support the channel because I buy a lot of the stuff that isn't sent to me for review. So I just, again, wanted to say thank you to Audeze for sending it. It won't affect what I say about the review. With that being said, let's dive in. Now, before I get too far, I want to start with something important, because I know I have a big gamer community following as well. The Audeze LCD-X, it's a hi-fi headphone. Obviously, it's $1,200. It's true audiophile sound, but it's incredibly easy to drive. So I wanted to start with this because this is rated at 20 ohms with 103 decibel sensitivity rating. That means that you can basically power it off anything. This is a $10 Apple Lightning dongle, and then this is the Helm Bolt DAC that I reviewed in the past, which has a noticeable amount extra power than this, but you can power it over one of these. So even if you just have a dongle because you put all your money into a headset, it doesn't mean you can't have excellent sound, and this is like a nice logical stepping stone before you get into larger amplifiers in case you wanted a volume knob. So the good thing is you can basically buy any amplifier you want. Just make sure it has the features and the sound quality you're looking for, but don't get it with the assumption that you need an insane amount of power to drive these. These do scale well with power, having a higher wattage rating. However, it's not necessary. So I wanted to start with that, because the other thing I want to point out is, even if you're playing on a console for some reason, obviously this is a 1/4-inch adapter, but you can get a step down to 3.5. Technically, you can power this off a controller. But if you're on PC, I'd still recommend at least a basic amp DAC setup, even as simple as the Helm Bolt, because that'll clean up your motherboard audio. So I just wanted to start with that. We're going to get into the comfort and build quality next, but pretty cool thing to have. So let's talk about weight, because this thing has a significant amount of it. It's not a lightweight by any means, and Audeze rates it at 612 grams. As you can see here, I'm measuring at 604. It's a pretty heavy headphone, but thanks to this leather suspension strap design, it helps transfer the weight fairly evenly across your head. So I've used these for a long time now. It's actually been one of my daily drivers for a lot of my music listening, and I'll say why soon. But some people will be concerned about the weight. I did want to point that out. I think once you get used to it, as long as the weight is distributed evenly and thanks to the pad design, it can still be extremely comfortable to wear. Now, these ear pads are huge. They actually have a good amount of depth to them. I'm getting almost about 30 millimeters of depth, which is great. And when you look at the height, I have about 65 millimeters of height. And if I go to the width here, about 50 millimeters of width. So this can fit large ears, and the good news is whether your ear sticks out a little bit or it's relatively flat, you should still be able to get away with this not compressing your cartilage, your ear pinna. That's a good thing, because that can negatively impact the sound quality, or at least your perceived sound quality. imaging, things like that. So I like that the depth is there. That is adding to the weight, of course, but they stripped out, I think, almost 100 grams of weight from the older LCD-X because they changed the magnet structure. There's less magnets going across, but they still have the same driver per se. It's a 106 millimeter planar magnetic transducer, so it's a big boy. Now, planar magnetic drivers have their own unique sound typically when you compare it to dynamic, but a larger planar magnetic driver like this is going to have some weight. So I want to talk about comfort from my experience, not from just a feature standpoint. Now, this has a lot of metal. It's built incredibly well. It looks beautiful. I really like the understated monochromatic look. I kind of have two design approaches that I really like. I like the darker heavy metal type look of this, more industrial, and I like the woods and natural classic look, if you will, that can look a little bit more vintage. So I admire both of those designs. With this one, what's interesting is when you put it on, and the clamp force isn't terrible, okay? It's considering the weight, you want a decent clamp force because you don't want this thing falling off your head with movement. So they have no choice. The pads, because they come out a little bit more in the back, produce an excellent seal around my ear, and even with head movement, I find that it's not affecting the sound quality. Some headphones, when you move your head around, it can affect how it sits on your head, which can negatively impact sound. So the headband, it is so close to the actual spring steel headband on top. This leather suspension strap, I think over time it may stretch and start bumping up against it. Mine is like within a ½ millimeter, it feels like. I'm basically, if I push this down, I'm touching it. So it's really close. It's gonna depend on your head shape. I wish it was just like a little bit longer, but there's no real way to fix that. You do get these adjustable steel posts here, which is nice and strong. It can be a little bit challenging to slide, but I want to point out these little screws right here. You can use the Allen wrench key to adjust the tightness of it. One of mine was looser than the other, and I noticed that one side would adjust itself more easily. So all I had to do is tighten that set screw, and it's been fine since. Once I've dialed it in, I didn't have to adjust it ever again, and it still fit in the case even with this set to this, this height setting. So, but for comfort, so what was weird to me, and I find these incredibly comfortable. I can still wear these for hours at a time. You might want to do this once in a while to breathe out. There is a resonance in this chassis that's at a very low frequency. So when I move my head, it's almost like I can hear and feel my heartbeat a little bit. It's a really deep rumble that I haven't really experienced on other headphones. It sounds almost like it's a closeback and you're getting some of the transference from a cable, for example, when that's not the case. So it's a little odd. It's not negatively impacting my sound or comfort per se. I just hear these deeper frequencies. Again, that's just how it interacts with my head. The cable doesn't really have any microphonics issues. Obviously, if you rub any cable that's hardwired to a headphone, you're going to pick up some of that. But this is one of the best cables I've seen included with any headphone I ever reviewed. It's just the right length. I love the jacket. It's flexible. It's a good look. And it's mini XLR, which is a huge win because you can basically buy any mini XLR to whatever termination you need on the other side. If you're buying aftermarket cables, you're not stuck with something proprietary like you typically find on a Sennheiser product, for example. So I love that they did this. To me, it should either be mini XLR or, you know, the 3.5 millimeter like you see on other products like, you know, from Meze Audio or Hifiman. So I do love the cable and I really love the sound. So let's get into why I like the LCD-X so much. So one distinct advantage with planar magnetic open back headphones is the bass extension. And typically when you have an open back dynamic driver headphone, say a Sennheiser HD650, for example, they tend to have bass roll off in the lower frequencies. Even the 650 or 660 S2 that just came out for $600, they fixed some of the bass. They emphasized the bass a little bit more, but it still won't compare to something like this. So if you're looking for an open back, but you want that, you know, deeper bass extension and texture to the bass, a planar magnetic is typically going to give you that. That's partly due to these larger planar magnetic drivers, but also with the nature of planar magnetic transducers and how they work. And as you can see how that translates to on the frequency response, the sub bass is there. It does roll off just slightly, but when you compare it to an open back dynamic, there is still quite a bit of energy going on in the sub bass region. And it's relatively a table all the way up into the mid-range and treble region. It starts to pick up at 2000 Hertz and then it dips back down only to pick up again just about 5000 Hertz. It then tapers off and then you get some really nice air and presence above 10K. So it has a fairly unique sound presentation, and some people may find it a little bit dark or veiled. Even though it looks relatively flat on the measurement charts, I think the sound when you get it out of the box has more of a warm, cozy sound signature and nothing overly analytical. I find the bass to be extremely tight and precise. It's very well textured and full, and I think it lends itself well to a lot of different listening preferences or genres. So whether you're listening to EDM and hip hop, or you're going all the way to jazz or classical, this sound signature lends itself as a very general purpose bass without either being underemphasized or overemphasized. I think it's tastefully done to where you can pretty much plug and play and enjoy the default sound signature. The good news is I found that the LCD-X takes to EQ extremely well. There is a large amount of overhead available with this, so this is a great starting point because it's a little bit on the warmer, neutral side. I think it's one of the more agreeable sound profiles out of the box, but if you crave more bass, it's very easy to add a bass shelf, you know, below 100 Hertz, for example, in case you want a little bit more of an impact. The slam and dynamics of the bass, it's good. I don't think it's as great as, you know, a Focal Clear in a similar price range, but it's definitely up there when you factor in the, that this is a planar open back. There's other pros to that as well. So I listen to, you know, lower quality produced older rock music, more critical listening stuff, and even on rock music, I found that guitars still had enough bass energy to them so that they didn't sound too thin. I really like the mid-range presentation of the LCD-X because even though the voices aren't this dominant mix in the track, they are slightly, and when I say slight, you could see even, you know, when I mentioned the frequency response, they're not the forefront of the mix. They're either with the mix or just slightly back, and it's a nice, clean, laid-back approach. I don't find the voices overly veiled. They're just not a dominant feat or part of the song. And what I really like about the LCD-X is it's rewarding you with really good resolution and texture and detail, but it's not over analytical. Now, I find that when you compare the LCD-X to something like the Hifiman Arya Stealth, which I also really like, the Arya Stealth has a little bit more resolution, a little bit more soundstage. It's tuned to sound a little bit thinner, brighter, airy than the LCD-X. So what I've found that because of that, your experience will greatly vary on what you listen to. Obviously, you can have your own preference. You might just like a more airy, lighter sound, or you might want something a little bit dark and heavier sounding, more comfortable sounding, if you will. So this can come down to preference. However, the Arya Stealth is not going to hide issues with a track. So while I do agree that when I'm listening to it at the most critical level, I feel I can get a little bit more resolution out of the Arya Stealth, but when I'm listening to everything and I'm listening to an older song from Chevelle, for example, an old rock song, it's more enjoyable for me to listen to on this, at least at a medium fun volume. I don't like to blast my headphones because I'm hoping to review audio for more than a couple years, so I don't listen to it at extremely high volumes. And I found that for long listening sessions, even though I still find the Arya Stealth extremely comfortable, from a sound presentation, this is a more comfortable sound presentation. It's like sitting in a very big, comfy leather couch. Maybe it's not best for your posture or whatever, but when I sit in it, I instantly feel relaxed. And this is like my couch listening headphone. I don't have to think about what I'm listening to. I can just play whatever I want, and I really, really enjoy the sound. So I don't want to knock the Stealth, the Arya Stealth, because I think it has its own place, and I think it's a really fun, analytical, great headphone. So I did some experiments in the past couple months, because I've had this for a little while now, and I've invited a couple of my buddies over that are, you know, into sound. One of them pretty hardcore. You'll see some coverage coming up next month with him, which is going to be fun. But I had several headphones out. I had headphones from Meze, I had a couple from Hifiman, including the the HE1000 SE. I had the LCD-X, I had probably about 6 or 7. I know I had the Sennheiser HD650 or the 6XX and the 560. We just started listening to a bunch of stuff. And both of my friends liked this one the most. So a non-audiophile person that hasn't listened to countless headphones at the most critical level, you just play a song that you're familiar with and you like, they tend to gravitate towards the LCD-X. And I think that says a lot, again, with how it presents the sound. If you find that that veil in the upper mid-range is not quite what you want, that whole 3,000 to 4,000 hertz range, you can EQ that. You could lift it up and give you a little bit more energy. You know, if you want the acoustic guitars to have a little bit more of a ring to it, you can easily do that. I didn't find it needed anything above 10,000 hertz because I actually like that little airy presence that I got from it. But again, out of the box, it was physically comfortable, and then the audio presentation was not jarring in any way. You can still get rewarded with good detail and resolution without being as in your face as some other headphones that are EQ'd to do it that way. So that about wraps up my review. I've been using these a lot. These have actually been my daily driver headphone for any time I'm listening to music on headphones. If I'm okay with being on a wire, this has been my go-to for quite a while now. I do have to pull them off my head a little bit to kind of let my ears breathe just because of that leather pad. But again, if I'm not dealing with trying to get every nuance of music out of my listening experience and I just want to play anything I want to play without messing with EQ, I can plug it into that dongle on my phone. I can hook it up to any computer and just start playing music and enjoy it and not have to think about it. And you know, at the end of the day, as much as an audiophile, I like to analyze everything I have. It's really about the music and what you're listening to and getting that passion and excitement from listening to tracks, whether it's hearing something for the first time or hearing stuff that you've loved forever and you want to just enjoy it. And the LCD-X really is a special headphone at that price range. I know it's not the cheapest thing out there for people who have looked at much less expensive stuff, but it's also not Summit Fi pricing where it's like $3,000 to $40,000 headphones. You can have an incredible listening experience, and because it's so efficient, you don't have to buy a $1,000 amp to go with it. You can buy a $100 amp and have a great time. And for that reason, I absolutely love the LCD-X. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this review helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next one. And with that being said, I'll see you next time. Bye.